handmade tags for junk journals with a definite feel of spring. Hello, it's Joey and today we're making tags with the colours and texture inspired by a spring morning walk. I'm using lots of book pages today. That's for both the base of the tags and for the decoration. So if you wanted to make these tags and you don't have many digits, then this is definitely a project for you. We get to play with a bit of paint, with some glue, with some stamps, and I'll share my design thoughts as I go. I'll share the choices and the thought process I have as I pick and choose the things to add as decoration. This project is for you if you're a beginner junk journaler, because although there are quite a few elements to the tag, I'll take you through it step by step and it's really very easy. But if you are more advanced and you feel like having a go, you can tailor and tweak and substitute in your own individual supplies and really personalise the design to your own taste. The colours and the choice of birds as decoration and the texture in the wool that I've used in this tag are very much informed by a walk in the spring woods nearby that I had this week, and I just wanted to bring some of that well-being feel into the project and the junk journaling that we're doing at the moment. The supplies that I'm using today are pretty varied for this project, and I thought I would do something a little bit different and just lay them out on a craft desk in my studio, in my craft room, and show you all of these. Now, you don't need absolutely everything and you don't need exactly the same item, but there are quite a few elements to this tag, and I thought, well, really that's part of the fun, isn't it? Bringing together all of these varied components and mixing them up to make something incredibly special. So if I just talk briefly through the items that I'm going to use today, the fundamental component is vintage book pages, or really just relatively thick book pages. So these are quite vanilla-y, quite thick, and I'll be using about 10 sheets from this book, and there's also a book underneath with some music papers in which will go on the top of the tag. It's just in here, just a subtle element of decoration starts to come through. I'm going to be adding little pieces of paper, so any of your little scraps you can use, and the image on this tag, the primary focal point, comes from an old book. So this is a book, what's it called? Animals and Plants of Britain and Europe, edited by Michael Chinnery. And I will just be pulling out a page from here and ripping an image out of one of these pages. So this is definitely a project where you can not use digits if you don't have any, or you could augment the tag with extra little images if you so wish. I might use a couple of little images from my collection here. So I've got them relatively tidily sorted in a little basket. I'm going to add a button and some texture. So bringing in that texture, things that I noticed on my walk, by way of thick wool that you can see there and some Hessian string. I might do a little bit of stamping so you can see a text stamp. And to add some of that nice fresh spring colour, I've got my paint sticks here, a little bit of, it's actually children's watercolour paint, just a water-based paint. And I've been making some of my own little stamps, having a play with old corks from a wine bottle and some little bits of whatever these are called, these little metal circles, and arranging them in different ways just to add some interest to my stamping. This way of using book pages that I'll show you, this tessellating technique, I will be using to make this masterboard, if you want to call it that, also a junk journal cover, which I'll be using it for. So as you can see, this is what we're going to be making. It has quite a lot of texture on the inside. What I'm going to do is make a junk journal as part of my Junk Journal for Beginners series, and just fold in the cover, fold it over and put some pretty papers in there. I'm also going to do a video where I use the same item, if I just open this up, to make another of my little birdie type folders, which I really enjoy making. So come along for the ride, let's make the tags and let's have some play with our supplies today. The first step in this process is to stick quite a few book pages together to make the back of this larger piece of paper that will then be cut up to form into tags. So this is an example, as I showed earlier, that I've collaged that will work as a journal cover. what I'm going to do then to begin with is use about 10 pages from this book. Let's just rip them off. And I'm using my cutting mat as a bit of an outline because I've found that if I use this rectangle on the cutting mat as a bit of a guide, I tend to get a decent number of tags in a fairly neat form out of the tessellated book pages that I put together. So let's just tear off about 10 sheets. 8, 9, 10. I buy a lot of these books in batches on eBay. I have had quite a lot of questions on my channel about where I get my book pages from, and given that we haven't been able to go to charity shops, which are thrift stores for you guys over in the US, I haven't been able to pick them up there. Fortunately, I had rather a stockpile. So I'm starting with a book page lined up to my top left hand corner if you have one of these cutting mats. If not, don't worry, you can still just put a lot of these book pages together and maybe just check that you've got a bit of a right angle corner to help with the cutting into your tag shape when we've made all of the base. So let's just work through with a nice relatively liquid glue and put some of these together. In fact, that could go down there. Just one on top of the other, not necessarily in any particular scientific placement order. All I want to do is cover the mat with enough book page that when I cut this up, it's going to be robust enough to form into tags. So it probably means that when we're done, I will have a couple of layers of book page per tag and also some pages from a book about music on top, just for decoration. And that one is a little bit thinner. The music pages are a little bit more delicate. So I'm really getting the structure of the tag to come from these book pages, and I think it's a great way of using our book pages, and we get a result that I think is really interesting on the back because we've got text and it feels really fun to use our book pages in this way. I just really like it. How satisfying just to spend a good 10 minutes gluing book pages together. Who would have thought that that was my objective in life? This is, I don't know what GSM, but relatively thick. You'll find some book pages are perhaps a little bit too delicate to use for this. So have a think which book page works for which of your projects. And I have a theory, maybe I should test this in a video sometime, that every book page has a purpose. So every type of book page, whatever the paper, whatever the font, whatever the colour, whatever the texture, there's something that we junk journalers could do with it that turns it into something magical and special. What do you think? Agree or disagree? Let me know. So, it doesn't take long, does it, to fill in our rectangle here. I'll have something down there, maybe down here, fill in the corner. Again, as you can see, nothing too regular or routine about this, so there isn't some theory to remember in any way whatsoever. And don't worry that when you put these pages on top of each other as you glue them, that you haven't necessarily got glue on every side, because what we'll do is just tidy up with glue at the end. I definitely need a bit more in the middle here. So we start filling in now. I've got a single layer at least on all of my rectangle. I'm just going to go in with some other sheets now and add a bit more resistance, a few more layers in some of the places where I feel it's a little bit thinner. Because what we're going to do is add a layer of music paper on top, and then this will be the base of our tags. So it's a substitute for having card, and I think a really lovely way of creating a tag from start to finish, going all the way through. So that can go on top there. I think when you put pages on top, it's good to think about
overlapping some of these edges rather than going on top identically again. So that will certainly make our tags a little bit stronger. I've only got a single sheet at the top left, so I'm going to add a bit more at the top here. My preference on these book pages is to retain the glory of that frayed edge. So I like that to be seen on the tag, so I'm going to have that on the outside of my rectangle, and we're doing really well. So a bit more up here I think, because that's still only single sheets, so maybe we'll go that way up there. Doesn't take long, does it, just to put these together? So this is a format, a style of putting book pages together that I'm thinking has lots of different purposes. So today we're going to use it for making tags, but I think it's got great potential for, why don't we have it that way, for making journal covers in lots of different ways, whether you want to collage them or not. You could paint them, you could add a sewn image, you could cut something out of a book and put that on, or the envelope folder new design that I showed a bit earlier. So I'm going to have a go at that. And I just really like making envelope folders, or any sort of folder with no particular purpose, just for the fun of it. So we have pretty much a double layer everywhere. Let's have a look on the back. So I suspect there are little pieces that I need to lift and glue down. Yes, so that one's okay. Let's just go round and fill in where we haven't quite glued down. It's not too bad actually. Done a better job of it this time. So now what I'm going to do is choose which of these sides I want to be the front and back. So by that I mean when I retain visibility of the back on the tag, which will get seen for some of the uses of the tag, I'll be able to see some of the book pages. So I think I prefer this side visually, so I'm going to turn it over and decorate this side. So for some reason I feel that this is the side for me to cover up. So now what I'm going to do is just take some other book pages that are a bit more about the cosmetics and cover this, in this instance, with music paper. And it's delicate sheets, so relatively thin, and its purpose is, although it will add some strength and some structure to this rectangle, it's not there to actually make the tags more robust. We've done that job with the main vintage book pages. This is really about seeing those music notes. I just think there's something so special about music paper. So I thought I would just add that in, again, a bit randomly and intentionally, keeping them not all the same way up. I think I will tear a bit of that blank off. Let's glue that down. Just keep going. So it's good to have a bottle of glue that flows. That will speed things up. Just got a little bit peeping out here as a gap, which I'm going to fill in. Voila, really very quick. So we have tessellated book pages, we have enough coverage of notes of music. So I think what we'll do is I'll dry it off a little bit just to help, and then what we're going to do is cover it with some beautiful shades of fresh greens from some of the colours that I saw on my morning walk. I just thought I would bring that in, from the daffodils, and maybe even using a bit of paint, whatever comes to mind, whatever you have in your supplies. Let's bring some of that fresh green, fresh start in and cover this with a bit of colour. So I've dried it off with a heat gun, and we now have some of that tippy-tapness, the strength starting to form, and it feels really exciting that this will be a base for our tags. So I'm going to add colour, and I said I would choose some fresh spring greens. They're not going to be laden on the paper, so as you can see in this example, I've got just that hint, in this case a little bit of red in there as well, a hint of the green and yellows of shoots of grass, and where I walk there are daffodils, and it's just amazing. You can hear the birds singing, so I felt like that would be great to bring into our tag today. So let's add just whatever we've got by way of colour and mediums. It really doesn't matter, and this is an opportunity for you to dig out your supplies and make use of things that you perhaps don't use very often. Are there some things that lurk in your cupboards that actually have great opportunity for playing with them and bringing into our projects? I often like to make life easy with these with my mica spray. So this is the one that's made up with about 3 different colours. I like to mix things. It's always a bit of fun seeing what randomly appears, but that gives a bit of the bronze effect as well as wetting the paper. And I have been using my paint sticks, and I pulled out in the set I bought of 24, some of them are called Day Glow. These are Little Brian is the brand. They're relatively cheap, perhaps cheaper than some other brands that look a bit like this. But I think it's just time to scribble and play. And there's nothing wrong with projects that are simple. I also think this would be a great project for mass making. So the sort of project that you see Tina Shabby Dabby Doodah making, where she does mass making, I do think this would be a candidate. So maybe Tina can let me know if she agrees or disagrees, because what you can get is like, I don't know, 8 tags or so from a large sheet like this, depending on how big your tags are. This is a fantastic gold metallic paint stick, and it has so many uses. Great for doing borders on your index cards, and I suspect there are going to be colours in this paint stick set that I use up before others. I'll have a little bit of brown. I might go in with my fingers in a minute and just smudge it all about. And here's my yellow. I think it's the yellows and the really fresh greens that denote spring, that in the vegetation, in the life, the grass, the trees that we see round here, it's the leaves and the grass and the shoots that start to show through in a different colour, and it's then when you really start to think that the seasons are changing, and I feel like we really need that at the moment. I felt that doing this with these nice bright colours was a really positive way of doing a project that's part of my beginner series for junk journaling. So it's not meant to be a difficult series, it's meant to be things that we can all do, including doing things where we don't necessarily have a huge number of supplies. So doing this step by step and offering substitutes for the different materials that we can use, using basic book pages, not expensive cardstock, I hope is helpful if you are a beginner. And no doubt if you are not a beginner, there will be ways that you can really add something bespoke, special, in your style, that makes these tags exactly what you want them to be. And I would love to know about that. I would love to hear what your adaptations are. What are you adding, and are you including these in a junk journal as an embellishment? Or, so something I thought we could do is actually use this tag as the cover of a junk journal. Imagine that with some ripped book page behind, maybe half of that page. So imagine really going for something, maybe trimming it down, maybe some of those scraps that we've used in the tag going to be, let's go the whole hog and let's see something on the cover. We could add some extras, maybe some text, maybe splash a bit more paint. I think there may be a junk journal cover forming from the tag itself. Let me know what you think. Shall we do a junk journal with the tag on the front of the card, or shall we use the Collage cover as the cover of a junk journal? Let me know what you want us to do. Right, let's carry on, just get a bit more of this colour on. It doesn't need to be completely covered, and I actually think if there's gaps, let's have a bit of green. I think if there are gaps, that's part of the joy of it, that it isn't meant to be a flat canvas as the backing to the tag. Do you use watercolours in your junk journaling in any way whatsoever? So this set I haven't used for some time, and now that I've just cracked it open, it's one of those items where you think, I really ought to be doing more. I'm delving into the darker green there, and maybe I should pick up some of the yellow, because we are talking, oh that's nice, we are talking about light fresh greens and a spring feel. That feel of positivity and starting afresh. That feeling of well-being that we so need. Right, I've got quite a lot of colour on this one, perhaps a bit more than I had on my first version where I made up my first ones. And perhaps that's an improvement. We vary, don't we? Every time we do a project it's a little bit different. They're all unique. So again, I think what I want to do is I'm going to dry that off, and then I'm going to add a bit of texture with my handmade stamps, and I'll tell you how I put those together. So I've had another go with the heat gun to dry it off, fair blast. And I don't know if you can see it, but this now has just a few little striations of gold. So that's the metallic gold paint stick coming through. I really like this fresh green that came from the watercolour paint. So that's from, this is my Arteza palette. That worked well. The brown I think is needed for contrast, and the really bright green, although it feels rather not so natural because it is so bright, I do feel it brings out something really quite light and fun and fresh. And I'm not going to criticise, I'm not going to scrutinise too much, I'm just going to enjoy the process and go with it. So next step is adding stamps, and this is about adding some of the detail for the eye, some of the texture, and I think I'll do that with a text stamp that I've used before. I've got a smudge stamp, so this is, you can just see a distribution of dots of different sizes that's great for adding that aged feel. And then the other element that I'm going to use, and this was really just playing, let me show you. So I've got 4 little stamps that I'm going to use that seem to work quite well. I'll show you what they came from. Some time ago at a car boot sale I bought these, which are they washers? So they're pieces of metal that I just thought they were interesting and fun, and I didn't know, of course I didn't know what to do with them, but I do feel like there's something to be done with them in our craft. They're quite heavy. So with those and a larger one, and I've got quite a lot, I'll never get through them, I have just taken a few of them and stuck them to make circular patterns. One of the limitations I have in my stamps is I don't have many things that are circular. So all I did was, with regular glue, just stick various ones of these in patterns, and I had a go the other day, and with a relatively inky pad, it adds something when you have something circular on paper, and it's quite satisfying to make something of your own. I think we could probably do something to do with flowers with all of these circles. The idea was that it would add something a bit different to some of our papers. So let's have a go with the one that I've made. 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 6 of the little ones around the base of this cork. Not sure what the wine was on this one. I don't want to do too many, but enough that when you think about cutting this paper up into whatever size tag you want, I think you want some of these circles on each tag. So that's the kind of spread and the number that you want to stamp across in whatever ink pad colour you want and you have. So why don't we have a single, so varied by size, varied by pattern. I think circles really work. So I've got that. I'm going to add my text, which is always good. Not absolutely everywhere, so I don't want the whole page to be texted. I do think it starts to look very interesting as a background, and when we come to add the little extra elements on the front of the tag, I'm going to add a little bit more stamping again, but look at whatever stamps you've got and think about how you could use them to add texture to your projects. Voila! I think it's probably time to cut this up. My large Fiskars paper trimmer is out, and I'm going to cut my tags down from this very large sheet to be about 8 centimetres across by about 14 centimetres high. And I think that gives us a shape that is great for on the front of the journal cover if we think we're going to do that, but also a substantial tag and enough space for us to play with our images, our fabric, a button, bits of scrappy paper. So let's get trimming. This piece overall is, I should have said at the beginning, about 28 centimetres high by about 43 centimetres wide. So let's just trim a sheet off, a column that is about 8 centimetres. I'll do it this way. It's quite thick now, having added layers of book page, extra book page, and then paints. It feels really nice. It's got that crinkly feel. So I want about 14 centimetres here, and this will give me 2 tags to start to play with. And obviously I can cut that down later, or I could do something else with it. So time for the really great fun. I'm going to first of all just do a tiny bit of remedial action to glue down some of these spare frayed edges. Doesn't need to be perfect, particularly if you are going to sew around this, but I think I'll just add a little bit more there. And it's time to just turn them into a tag with a little bit of trimming. So I'll just measure 2 of these boxes in on either side and cut it. So I quite like to have tags with a fairly wide area here. I don't know why, to me it just is the design I like. So quite wide here. So why don't we do this other one while we're at it? Trim that down. And then I'm going to add a little bit more texture and pattern. So as you can see, we end up with quite a lot of interest for the eye all the way around this. There's so much going on, I love it. So I'll start with a little rather delicate stamp. As you can see, quite a lot of fronds mixed, and I think it does look quite botanical. So I'm going to put that at the top left and the bottom right. So as you can see on this one, there's a little bit here, a little bit here. It's probably more visible on this one. So a little bit top left and a little bit bottom right. So just have something behind while I stamp. I'll use my much used Adirondack ginger, so pale brown. It's the same colour I used when I was stamping before. I did try black and it just felt too bold, too strong on some of them. So top left, bottom right. Let's just do the other one while we're at it. It's easy to do in a batch, isn't it, when we make tags like this. Top left. And I'm doing it so that the stamp is overlapping the edges of the tag. So I've got a couple of corners coloured in now. So I think at this stage it's time to add the embellishment that goes in the bottom third. So let's just pull out, I really did just pull out some scrappy bits of paper, and what seems to work well on this is, let's have some of the packaging that's sitting behind. So my It's either IKEA or it's Amazon. I'm going to have a bit of yellow. It's just a leftover piece from another project, and I don't want the straight edge to show. I want a couple of pieces layering, and that will just go on the bottom third. So I'm going to have the packaging on top because I think that's got better texture. I prefer that colour as a dominant colour on top, and I want to cover up quite a bit of this yellow but still have some of it peeping through. And I think it was going to look great because we've got yellow in the tag, we've got yellow right at the top left here, so it all starts to blend together. But what a great way for using up your little scraps of paper as well. So that will go on there, but just before, in fact that's a bit too deep, isn't it? It's too heavy to the eye. Let's reduce it, that's so much better. Before I stick that down, what I want to do is sort out my images up here. And on this tag what I've decided to do is have a little trio. And the trio is, let me grab my book, something from my Animals and Plants book. I didn't spend too long choosing which one. Shall we just pick something? They're quite cute, aren't they? To some extent I look for colour, to some extent I look for form, and occasionally I look for the direction in which the bird is looking, but to be honest there's nothing too scientific. So what have we got at the front? That's a big one, that's a little bit too big. Let's just go for this. A corncrake. And with this project, what I want to do is actually tear around it. I don't want the tidy form of scissors and a straight edge. So I want one of these, and I'm going to add a couple of little didges. And you saw this earlier. Now, I did say you don't have to use didges, and you absolutely don't. So I think this is from Pink Monarch Prints. I'll leave a list of everything I mention in the description box down below. And I'm just going to pick a couple of elements. Ooh, there's one with a bird. That would work well. So many pretty things. Right, let's have a butterfly and a number. And I want to reduce this one down, take away some of the extra white. And the way that I do this to get the shape of the image is press my thumb quite firmly down on the paper and effectively tear around my thumb, because it's hard to see the image that you're trying to tear around, but I do want it to tear. I want the image to be roughly the shape of the picture that's on it. So I now have, and I'm definitely going to get rid of as much of the straight edgeness of any book page as well. So I've now got an image here, I've got a number, and I've got a ticket that needs its little arced corners cutting off. So what I do, I have these fluty edge scissors and I just snip the corners. I don't know how you do it when there are fluty edges. Is there a piece of equipment, a tool that's meant to do little round corners? So now I've got three images. My little trio I'm going to tuck behind the little bar of paper that we've made, and that was why I didn't stick it down to begin with. So my little trio is going to be adhered using the collaging technique that we've been using, which is glue in the middle, leaving space at the sides. Hold your, get rid of that, then you can see. Hold your little bar of paper roughly where you think it's going to go, and I'm going to have my bird above it, and I'm happy that his beak is peeking out over the edge. That's perfectly fine. I want another image down here. I like the colours. I think that can go to the edge. And I'm going to have a number on the left. I want a bit more detail and a bit more strength, because there's a lot of brownness that's just plain in the backing to this digi. Go all the way around. I don't know what's going to be visible. So that's going to go just tucked in to the left of these. So I've got that layering going on. I'm just adding a bit more glue to tuck it all down because we only put glue in the centre of these images as we were attaching them to make life easy for doing the collage. And now that they are stuck down, I can add my little bar of paper down here. As I say, I do think we can all do this. To some extent, I think the biggest tip I would have is choose a palette of colours of about 3 colours and try to stick to that, and that will make the biggest difference. I'm just going to tear that off, and again I'm not using scissors, I don't want to use scissors. I want something over here, so I'm going to use my date stamp. In fact, for the date stamp I'm going to have a different colour, then it's not all samey. I definitely want it to go on the bar of paper and also on the images, and that's nice and strong. I'm going to add a little bit of washi tape, so this really is a project for doing lots of different fun things with your supplies. I like the bold of the black and white in this, which speaks to the black that we've used in the ink. That can go there. And then to add a bit more texture, I'm just going to add a little bit of fabric across the paper. So in this one you can see I've added just a little bit of wispy fabric. Let's have a go at that. I'm getting a lot of value out of this old curtain. It's actually quite easy to tear, and I want something quite frondy and delicate. Is that a word? Frondy? So that is going to go across there. Oh, I've even got a flower in it. I love it. Right, nothing more complicated than a bit of glue, the same glue. So that will go on. Which way round shall we have it? Choices in everything. Do we have to decide? Yes, we do. Oh, it's got a bit of yellow on the fabric as well. That works for me. I think that can go there. I'll take a bit off to the right, it's a bit too long. Let's have it on an angle. Why cut straight? Great. And now I think what I will do is just bring it all together a little bit by running some stitches around it. So I'm just going to set up my sewing machine and add a running stitch around, and I'll add a little bit of zigzag just in the top left, and that's going to make the zigzag easier to see because we intentionally put the focal point shifted to the right, so I've got a bit more space up here, so my pattern of stitch is just going to sit nicely within a little bit more of a gap on the top left. So I've sewn around it, and that does add some robustness, and where we had any of these little bits of paper that weren't quite stuck down, it does really bring it all together. I want to take some of the plain whiteness out of this image. You can see on this one what I've done is I've actually stamped over it with that splodgy stamp again. So I'm just going to do a little bit of that, again with my brown. Any stamp you've got, just some delicate elements on there, and that will take out some of that unnatural whiteness. And I think what I will now do is make a hole and thread through just a little bit of textured wool and string. What I'm going to add as thread is this hessian that I think has been great at Christmas for on presents and in tags. I'm going to have some of that in my tag, maybe measure out a couple of lengths of the tag, and because I think it wants to be more woody and more textured, I'm also going to include a second element, which is this beautiful, thick, very natural coloured wool. So let's have a piece that's exactly the same length. Just cut that off. And I'll thread that through. So join them together, just put them at the hole and push the two of them through. There we go. Pull them through and then tuck these through there, through the hole. And the last thing I want to do is add a button on here. So just a relatively cheap packet of buttons, all sorts of colours. Let's see what we've got. Put a few out. Oops. Can already see one that I like the look of. So that is a grey. I think that would work well. I think that brown one's nice, but maybe a bit small. That's a nice colour. That goes with that. I like this big one. So I think we'll just be greedy, go for the big one.
And these are my handmade tags for junk journals with a spring wellbeing feel. Subscribe if you'd like to see more like this, including this collage cover and this folio, and give me a thumbs up because that really helps. I hope to see you soon.